Hey everyone, I'm Harold. I'm going to be just going over a couple quick slides before we start our workshop today. Let's see. Okay, so biggest thing happening right now is the hackathon in collaboration with the College of Engineering and Computer Science, as well as the College of Business Administration. This is a super huge thing because they're doing this to promote the new Masters in FinTech program. It is going to be the very first in the state of Florida, so we're going to keep promoting this. This actually starts on, it says it right here, March 8th to April 10th. So that's kind of the most important thing to know. It is a month-long hackathon, which is very different from pretty much any other. But most importantly, the top 10 teams, is it here? Wait, yeah. So the top 10 teams are going to be invited to a special summit that is going to get a lot of industry connections there. It's going to be really great. You're going to be honored for being one of the top 10 teams. So in a normal hackathon, usually it's like top 3 that are recognized. This is top 10 UCF teams will be recognized at this event. And the prizes, expect actual money as prizes and a good amount of it at that. It's not like just sending you like a console. It is like pretty cool. But that's for like the actual winners of the hackathon. So let me see. So they're talking about, so these are the 3 themes: sustainability and inclusive finance, embedded finance, and decentralized finance. So it is kind of fintechy. They are going to have, like, leading up to the event, there's going to be a couple of workshops kind of delving into these topics. So you don't need to, like, be into fintech to participate in this. If anyone has any questions, feel free to like raise your hand, let me know. And let's see. Yep, it is a month long, starts on March 8th. You can sign up for this until the hackathon ends, but you want to get started as soon as possible. And your team must only be, if you want to be participate, or if you want to be potentially invited to that summit event, your team does need to be all UCF students. There is a form for us. If you go to our link tree, that's the Finistra UCF sign up form. If you go to that, then like we'll reach out with you for further details, how we're going to support you during that, like any events in relation to that. Please use your Knight's email when you're signing up. Here's some helpful links. There's our dev post, there's Hack to the Future. These slides are on the link tree. And so meetings are here, 5 p.m., different stuff. Everyone knows what we're about. And Cave. So tomorrow, projects teams are meeting in the Cave from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., but it is open to everyone. It's just a space to kind of hang out and stuff. So it's from 1 to 3, just like a real nice consolidated time for everyone to kind of like actually be able to meet each other. So we're going to expect a lot of people there tomorrow, because that is going to, we have invited the projects teams to meet and meet one another, kind of start planning stuff, but everyone's welcome and we want to see others there. Tomorrow, there will be pizza. So another reason to go. So sometimes after these workshops, we'll go on food trips. If you just stick around, we can kind of plan it. Monthly social events, there's a Cave tomorrow. If you're one of our directors, you can come to our operations meetings, which leading to that, you can help make our next hackathon a success. We still have a couple of positions open for director positions specifically. So we've already, okay, nope, okay, and okay, nope, there we go. Nope, I don't like MacBooks, I'm sorry. So we've already started filling some positions, so you see that this list is a lot shorter. So we're really still looking for our lead hackathon organizers, question mark. We're thinking about dividing that really large role into maybe one that encapsulates a couple different roles, or like able to split the work amongst themselves. So there's that. Projects. So the executive board is handling projects right now. So if you're on a project team, you don't need to worry the fact that the leadership position is open, but you are welcome to apply for that. Sponsorship director, and then we also have development, mobile lead, finance, logistics, hacker experience. Some positions we might end up not filling if it just doesn't work out, and we acknowledge that, and that's fine. We have already started making plans for how we're going to go about things. The director interest form is on the link tree, so if it says director interest form, that's the one. And membership and dues, fill the form in the link tree. So membership and dues info, and then you can pay dues, which is $10. You can pay in person, or you can pay at nighthacks.org/dues. If you do want to pay in person, you might have to wait until the next event, because we have like a lockbox that we use for that, because I'm not going to take your money and put it in my pocket. There's a specified box for it, but we don't have that right now. Or you can use our Cash App, Night Hacks. If you use Cash App, please put your Cash App tag in the form, in that membership form. It's going to ask for your Cash App name. Please put it, because if you pay on Cash App, it only says like your tag. And if we can't cross-reference that to a name, then we don't know who you are. And you can still submit your resume to be sent to our sponsors, because we didn't have as many as we wanted. We are still potentially giving out the gift cards. There are 3 $20 Amazon gift cards that we will be giving out. So look for that soon. Hi, Rob. How's it going? And I put one last slide on here, but it's not there. Please welcome our guest or our valued Vice President, Elijah Smith.
Still got an hour left. Okay, so most of you guys already know what you're here for. Just in case someone is here just to hang out. This is a Chrome extension web workshop. So we're going to cover a couple of sort of basic development processes for when you're making a Chrome extension. If you've never written any web program before, you've never made a website or anything like that, you'll learn a little bit of HTML, CSS, and we're also going to be running some JavaScript. I'm not going to focus too much on any one, just because I want to focus on the process as a whole. And I know that a lot of you have already written them before. And hopefully, regardless of what you're here for, you'll learn something and you'll be able to walk away with a cool project. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. What we're going to do is we're going to find some place on your computer. So if you're not already logged into your computer, please make sure you do so. And we're just going to pick a folder for where we want to put our extension. So I have a projects folder, which is very disorganized. And the project that we're going to make today is sort of a study helper tool, which will prevent you from going to sites that maybe are distracting while you're currently trying to study for something. And you'll be able to turn study mode on and off. And if it's on, it'll prevent you from going to wherever you predefine that you don't want to go to, like YouTube, Twitter, anything that's distracting. Reddit is also one that I'm guilty of frequently. What we're going to do is we're going to call this project Study Helper, since that's what it's going to do. And at this point, you can go ahead and open it up in whatever IDE you normally use. So I have been converted to the Church of VS Code, which means that's what I'm going to use today. If you don't have an IDE installed that can handle HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, that's not a problem. You can literally write it at anything. If you want to just write it in a notepad, that's totally fine. I don't know what you guys have all installed, but this is my preference. So I'm going to go ahead and open that folder. I wonder if this actually is going to work. All right, sweet deal. So I have it open in my browser here. And essentially what we're going to do is we're just going to write a bunch of files with all of our code, and then we're going to load it up into Chrome every once in a while and reload it and test it. And I'll point out some useful tools that you can use to help make sure that it's working or not as we go. So with that being said, the first thing that we need to do for any Chrome extension is we need to define a manifest.json file. So I'm just going to go ahead and write it in here. Our manifest file is what is going to tell Chrome where all of our important resources are and things about our extension. So there's some sort of metadata information like the author, the name of the project, the description, the version number, stuff like that. But there's also a couple of important things that we can put in there, like icons we want to use for our extension, or maybe where certain scripts are that need to be run. So we're going to go ahead and build this out in a second. But first, I'm just going to go ahead and put a couple of extra folders in the same location because we're going to need them in the future. So we're going to make 3 different folders here. We're going to make an assets folder where we're going to put all of our icons and also a little GIF that I wanted to put in just because it's fun. We're going to make a HTML folder, and we're also going to make a CSS folder. No, we're not. We're a source folder. That's right. So in the source folder, we're going to put all of our JavaScript scripts, and in the HTML folder, obviously, you know what's going to go in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to reopen the manifest file. And I should have said this earlier, but I'm pretty much just going to go for it. And I'm just going to keep writing. If you have any questions at any point, please raise your hand. There are no stupid questions. I'd much rather stop and slow down so everyone's on the same page, especially if I maybe don't explain something well enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and build this up. Yeah. Yes, that is an excellent point. Okay. This should be a little bit easier to read, but just let me know if it's not zoomed in enough at any time. So in our JSON file, we need to follow a specific format, which is the JSON format. So if you've never used JavaScript before, JavaScript has a lot of things that will look very similar to a lot of other languages, but JavaScript has also defined sort of a format for data exchange that's used between different services on the web. And everyone uses JSON format to make sure that everything is standard. And it's the exact same format as a JavaScript object, hence JavaScript object notation or JSON. So it's a very simplified concept of an object compared to what you might experience from an object-oriented language. Really, all that we have is an object is defined by curly brackets and then keys and value pairs on the inside. And we can make the value of those keys anything we want. We can make it a string, we could make it another object, we could make it an array, we could make it a number, and we will do all of those things. But we're just gonna honestly just start writing out our manifest and put all the things in here that we need. So the first thing we need is we need a name for our extension. We're gonna call it study helper, as we said earlier. And after every key value pair, we need to put in a comma. We can't put a comma after the last one in the object, but since we're gonna put a bunch more, I'm just gonna stick the comma in there prematurely. We also need a version. So as we update our Chrome extension, we can update the version information so that Chrome knows if it's a new version or not. So we'll start at 1.0.0. And we need a description. So you can make this whatever you want. We'll keep it short and sweet. Prevent navigation to sites during study. It said short and sweet, but I already broke that promise. Come on. There we go. Okay, so we had our description. The other thing that we need to specify in here is what manifest version we're using. So if you've ever used a different, library before for any reason, you'll know that, as people develop more things in that library, the version changes. So the manifest version is basically what level of Chrome we're using. And the current release is version 3. Version 3 makes a couple of changes compared to version 2. If you guys have never used version 2, you're not going to care about it at all. But this is the one we're going to stick with for now. If you were curious about what the differences are, you can absolutely look that up later. We also need to specify what's going to happen in the background. So our program needs to be able to listen in the background for when someone navigates to one of those bad sites. So we need to specify our background script that's actually going to do that. And the way that we do that, because there's lots of things that can run in the background, we're going to make it a JavaScript object because there can be multiple different things. And we're going to specify what's called a service worker. And our service worker is what's going to run in the background. It's going to be called when it needs to be. It's going to do all of its things, and then it's going to terminate automatically. I am not super familiar with service workers. It's a pretty new thing that is being more well supported. In the previous manifest version, you just could run a background script and make it persistent, which means it didn't ever turn off. But this is what they're migrating to, so we're going to specify that we want our service worker. And we're going to put it in the source folder, and we're going to make it background.js. So we haven't created that file yet, but we will. If you're creating a path in JavaScript, you always need to start it with a slash. If we wanted to go back one level before we go up, then we could start it with 2 dots, which would say go back 1, and we could change that as we want. But we're not going to do that. And so that covers for the background. We also need to define an action. So I'm going to take a quick detour here and move this around so that everyone in here can see. So you'll notice I have a couple of extensions pinned up here. And if I click one of these icons, something happens. That's what the action specifies. What do we want to happen when we interact with the extension directly? So we need to specify what do we want to bring up at that point. And what we're going to do is we're going to specify an HTML page that we can bring up, which is going to be condensed into just that little pop-up. And that's going to be where the main interaction of our system comes into play. So what we need to specify is we need to specify a default pop-up. we're going to set this to be html/popup.html, which again, we haven't created yet, but we will. And then also we need to specify what icon we want to put up there in the corner. So we also have a default icon here. And also, if you've ever done something with mobile development, you'll know that when creating icons for things, you basically have to support a lot of different sizes. For Chrome, we only have two sizes that we care about. We have one for store listings and also for that little icon in the corner. And I've made all the two assets we're going to use available on nighthacks.org/linktree. So if you go to our link tree, there's a little thing here called workshop assets. If you click that, it'll have you download, or actually it'll bring you to where I uploaded the two, maybe three assets that we have, and it's a zip folder. So everyone needs to go ahead and download this to your own computers. And once you do that, you can go ahead and open it. And all we're going to do is we're going to take everything that's in this assets folder. So we have two icons here. We have a 48 by 48 icon, which goes in the corner, and a 128 by 128 pixel icon, which is for things that require slightly larger. And then I also put a GIF in here that we'll try and insert later on if we have time. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop in the assets folder. If I open this up over here, we now have some new pictures in here. Can everyone give me a show of hands if you have everything downloaded, who's still trying to unpack things? You're good. Okay, we'll pause a short little while later. If you specify an asset that's not there, Chrome will not let you turn the extension on. So we do actually need to finish this step before we can really do a whole lot. All right, wait about 15 more seconds and then we'll just keep going. What's up? It's nighthacks.org/linktree. Same place you would go to sign in for the meeting, which we did not tell you to do this time. So my fault. Rob, what's up?
Yeah, I was just curious about CSS. Is that what you just make a CSS folder, or where does that?
We are going to embed it directly in the HTML file because there's only a little bit of the CSS that we're going to do. So if you absolutely could do that, you could make a separate folder for all of the stylings. For simplicity, we're not going to make any super crazy layouts, which is why I just want to put it all together. But that's a good question. Okay, so if you haven't done that, keep going. We'll try and catch everyone up in a little bit. And now we need to specify where those assets are. So we need to specify where our 48 size icon is, and that is in assets/icon48.png. And we also need to specify where our 128 is, and that is also in assets. And that is icon128.png. You might think that we need to specify the GIF as well. The GIF is not an icon. We're going to use that as part of our HTML page shortly. So don't worry about that quite yet. Yes, 48 by 48 is one, and 128 by 128 is the other. And those are the only two that are required for a Chrome extension. Everything else is optional. There's one or two other sizes that you can specify. All right, so we got that. There's a couple more things that we need to put in here first. We need to put in our regular icons. So this action section is only for that little button in the corner, but we do need the icons for other things as well. So we're literally just going to copy and paste this over here. It's the same two icons, 48 and 128. And this is where our manifest is. There's one other thing we're going to have to put in eventually, but we're not going to do it quite yet, I think. Actually, I lied. So that is the next thing up. So we got all that. The last thing that we need to specify in here is the permissions that our extension is going to require in order to function. So we only want to put in the permissions that we absolutely need. And we need to specify a permissions key, which is going to hold those permissions. And because we can specify one or more, the permissions go into an array. And the two permissions that we care about for this are web navigation, and we also care about storage. So web navigation just means that our Chrome extension is allowed to like listen for when you go to a website. And then storage lets us use Chrome's storage either locally or synced. If you've signed into Chrome before, that's your synced storage. And you can use either of those to store data and use it in other places. So it's not like you're passing data between scripts. Scripts instead can save data to storage, and then other scripts can load whatever's currently in. Okay, so this is everything for the manifest. Quick show of hands, who is finished with the manifest? Okay, that's pretty much everyone. So let's just jump right into the next thing. So we specified a couple of things in here that we need to create still. We're going to start with our HTML because that's the thing that's the most visible. So we're going to go into HTML here and we're going to create a new folder or a new file called popup.html. And quick show of hands, how many people have ever written an HTML document before in their lives? Okay, pretty much everyone. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, but at least still explain what's going on. So HTML is basically just a collection of tags that define what we want to put on our page. So there's lots of different kinds of tags. The two that are required to actually make this run is we need a HTML tag on the outside, which specifies everything in here is HTML. And then we need a head tag, which is kind of where you put all the like non-visible information about the page. And then we also need a body tag down here, which is where we're going to put the actual content. So in our header, eventually we're going to put a style section so we can put our styles in here. So we're going to put some CSS in here eventually to make it look a little bit better, to make things colorful. But we need to actually put the things in first before we know what we want to style. So in our body section, that's what's all going to be visible on the page. We're going to create a couple of things here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a div because we want to group things together. A div is basically just a non-visible element, unless you make it visible, that groups things together. And we can style the div independently. And the two things we're going to put in this are a button. We're going to call this toggle button. And we're going to put some text in here that says toggle. And we also need a paragraph here. And I will explain in just a second. And we want to put in here study mode, and we're going to put the word tech. So essentially what we're doing is we're saying in our pop-up, when we open it, the only two things that we care about are a button that turns study mode on and off, and then some text that tells us if it's currently on or if it's currently off. And we can't dynamically set whether it's on or off or interact with the button from here. We need to write JavaScript to do that, and we will very shortly. We're also going to create an ID for this. So we're going to call this mode label. And essentially, when you have a tag, you can put attributes on the tag to help specify certain properties that you want about it. The two most common properties that you use are an ID, which is unique to a single tag and lets you reference that specific tag, and a class, which a tag can have lots of different classes, and you can basically style all of the tags with that class at the same time. We don't actually want to do that here just because there's only two things. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to our style section. We're going to add a couple of CSS properties in here to make it look slightly better. So our pop-up, what we're writing right now is HTML, which means if we open this in the browser, it would try and take up the whole page. But we don't want the pop-up to do that. We want it to just be a little thing in the corner. So we need to specify how big our body section is going to be. And we're going to make it a width of 300 pixels, and we're going to make it a height of I don't know, 150 pixels. So we're saying the pop-up will always be this size, no bigger, no smaller. And we're also going to put a background color on here just for fun, and we're going to make it yellow. So what we're doing here is we're writing CSS selectors. In this case, we're selecting our body tag. And then we're giving it a bunch of style properties to make it look cool. And there's so many style properties, I can't even begin to talk about all of them. Usually, if you know what you want it to do, if you Google it, you can find the properties that will help you, or a Stack Overflow post of someone who had the same problem. Both are equally good usually. So style our body. We also want to style our button. And the button, actually, we're going to style both at the same time. So we're going to make basically a compound selector here. We're going to style both the button and the paragraph element. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the display property to be inline block. So there's a lot of different ways that you can organize elements on the page. Our display basically tells us like how should it be put in relation to other things. And inline block means they're block elements and they need to go in line with each other. You can put multiple in a line. By default, it's one per line and they stack on top of each other. Well, we want the button and the toggle and the text to be side by side. And we're also going to put in our div here, text align center, which you might think means align the text to the center. But in this case, we don't have any text directly in the div. So actually what it's going to do is it's going to center all of the things we did put in the div, which if you look down here, our div is our grouping element, and then we put our button in our paragraph. So it's going to center them horizontally in the grouping container. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to add a couple things here, just to make it look pretty. So we're going to add a margin, which means put some space to the left of this thing. So our toggle button is on the left, our paragraph is on the right. We're going to put 20 pixels of space in between so they're not running over each other. And we're also going to make our font weight bold just for fun because bold text is cool. So that's all the styling properties that we're going to put in here for now. We can actually, I think we can actually run our extension right now and see what this looks like. So we're going to try that. So if you don't have Google Chrome open it now. And what we're going to do is we're going to go, I don't know where to put this bar where it won't be in the way of literally everything. So we're going to go up here to settings. And then in our settings, there's a little thing down here called extensions. So that's where we can load our extension onto Chrome directly. You can also download them from the store if they're published, but ours obviously isn't published yet. We're going to click the button that says load unpacked, which means we haven't finalized our thing. We're just going to load whatever we have. And then you need to go ahead and find your folder somewhere on your device. So I put mine in desktop, projects, study helper. And just select the whole folder. So not anything inside, just the whole folder, and go ahead and select it. Manifest is not valid JSON. Cool. So Chrome is usually very helpful about these things. I didn't save it. That is probably the issue. I don't think there's anything else issue. So Chrome will tell you if there's something wrong. If Chrome does tell you there's something wrong, just raise your hand and let me know what it's telling you is wrong and we can try it. All right, so this is not helpful. Could not load manifest. Oh, could not load background script. So we haven't created the script yet, so we need to at least create it just so that it knows that it does exist. So we're going to go back into our source folder, backgrounds.js. We're not going to put anything in it yet. We're not there. We'll cover it later. But we at least need to create the file and save it. And then when we go back in here, now it knows what it is, and boom, it at least loaded up. We have other errors that we'll have to deal with. Permission. Is there supposed to be an S on here? There is. Wild. Okay, I led you guys astray again. So we have permissions in here. We also need to put an S because it's multiple permissions, obviously. And also, I'm just noticing I skipped over something else that we'll use later, but we should just put it in right now. And we're going to put in something called host permissions. Chrome has a lot of ways of making sure that you're not doing anything nefarious. And one of them is by restricting the amount of the URLs that you can actually check against when we're checking the web navigation. So we need to specify which ones we're allowed to process. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to create another array here, but we only need one thing. So we could put specific URLs in here. Like we could say we only want to look at google.com, but we're actually going to do pattern matching. So if you've ever used regex before, this will look fairly similar, but Chrome has their own pattern matching thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we just want to match literally everything. We want to check all of the URLs. So we don't care what the protocol is. We don't care if it's HTTP, HTTPS. That's what this star is. And we don't care about what the domain is either. It could be google.com, reddit.com, whatever. And we also don't care about like what the route is. Literally everything we want to check. So that's why we're going to put this in here. What's up? That is a good question. I don't know. It would be a good experiment to do in the future. I'm not going to do it here because I'm already not going to finish everything. But that is an excellent question and also something that the documentation probably will help with. So we're going to go back in here. If you have an error, you can go into the error button here and then click clear all. Anytime we make changes, we need to refresh our extension. So click the refresh button. And now we don't have any errors. So we can at least test this out and see if it works. So let's see if our pop-up shows up. Let's go up to the corner here. There should be a little puzzle piece. And this is your extensions. And we need to pin our extension so it's actually up here in the corner. And you'll notice the asset is a red X study helper. We don't want you to go there. And if we click on that, it'll open up a cool little thing here, which is, super interesting. Does everyone see this? Anyone having issues?
Mine says that the manifest file is missing one readable.
Check. Okay, so where is your manifest file? Is it at the same level as all of your other folders?
Yeah.
Okay, then make sure you're opening the right folder as well. Like you don't want to open anything inside. We want to open the folder that has all 4 of these together. This should be your file structure. If it's missing or unreadable, then missing implies that it's probably not at the right location. Let me actually read it real quick. Yes, so I did put all of the code on the repo, which I have a GitHub repository linked on the link tree. So if you get behind, you can always look at that and download that code and at least catch back up. I got to keep going though because we're not going to finish otherwise. I'm sorry, I can't help you on this one. Okay, so we have that. That's super cool. I'm actually going to go back in here and I'm going to remove this height property because I noticed that when I open the pop-up here, it makes it bigger than it needs to be. And instead, what we can do is if we remove the height property, then it's only as big as the content inside. So that looks a little bit better. So right now, this doesn't do anything, right? So what we're going to do next is we need to specify essentially a script that goes along with this that will actually do something interesting. So we're going to specify another tag down here, a script tag, which tells us we need to import a JavaScript file from somewhere. And we're going to make the source, meaning where is it, up 1 level, and then into our source folder, and then we'll call this toggle.js. So the 2 dots here are important to say it's not in the HTML folder we're currently in, it's 1 level up, and then go into source, and then toggle.js. And then this needs to have a closing tag as well. And I think that's pretty much it for our pop-up. So with that being said, we're going to go into our source folder and we're going to create another JavaScript file. We still haven't used background.js, but we're going to write toggle.js in here. We're going to create our script that basically handles all the actions on that HTML page. So JavaScript is a scripting language. It's not, it doesn't work in a lot of the same ways as object-oriented languages that you use like Java or C. There's a lot of different things that you can do. And one of them is that the main way that JavaScript works is that it's sort of event-driven, which means as events are happening on your page, we listen for those events and perform specific actions in response. So you'll notice in the pop-up, we have a button. The button clicking is an action, and we'll have to listen for that action. That's really the only interactivity we want to do. We want to specify what is our current study mode in that paragraph, and then we also want to change it when the button changes. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get a reference to those elements. We can always get a reference to specific elements. We're going to call this toggle button, and then we're going to call this one down here load label, because those are the IDs we use. So we'll just use that same nomenclature. And you'll notice that we don't have a specific type on here. We don't have to specify the type of the object. Instead, we can just specify a modifier. Constant means we've declared this, it's not changing. These elements aren't going to suddenly become different elements. So we can make these constant. If you can make something constant, it's usually a good idea too. And then we're going to write document.get element by ID. And then inside here, we're going to specify what the ID of the element we want was, and it was toggle button. So essentially what we're doing here is we're saying document refers to the overall page that we're referencing. And then get element by ID is a selector. So we can select specific elements based on properties like ID or class. In this case, we only want the one thing. So we're going to get element by ID and we're going to get the toggle button. And then we're going to do the same thing down here. And we're going to get the mode label. So now we have a reference to both of those elements and we can modify those elements as we want. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a variable here called study mode, and we're going to set it to be false. This is whether study mode is on or off. We'll modify it very shortly. So the main thing that we want to do on this pop-up is we want to listen for when the button is pressed, and then we want to do something like that. So we need to add something called an event listener to the button. And the listener is going to listen for when it's clicked, and it's going to execute something from there. So we're going to do toggle button dot add event listener. So this is a function, and there's two things that it takes. First, it takes what event do we want, and we're going to specify it's a click event. And then after that, we need to specify what is it going to do. So if you've never written JavaScript before, JavaScript, you specify functions, and you can call those functions from events to execute from there. So the functions aren't tied to an object or anything. They're just functions that we can execute. So what we could do is we could over here specify a JavaScript function, which always starts with a function keyword. And then we'll name the function click handler. And we can specify parameters in here. We're not going to specify any parameters because there aren't really any parameters associated with this event. We could put one parameter in here. There is one included that basically just keeps the details of the event. So if you wanted to figure out where they clicked, you could get that from that parameter, but we don't care about that. So we're just going to leave the parameter out. And then we can open the function and execute whatever code we want in here. And the code that we want to execute is we want to set study mode to be whatever it currently is not. And then we need to find a way to store this so that other scripts can use it. So this is where things get a little bit trickier. So, so Chrome has APIs that let you access storage within Chrome itself. If anyone has worked with asynchronous functions before, you'll know that it's a little bit tricky because these functions don't execute right away. If you've written C code before, basically everything executes in order, and you can expect that the thing that executes first comes before the thing that executes second. So Chrome doesn't really, there's a lot of synchronous code, but there's also a lot of asynchronous things as well. So accessing and writing to storage are asynchronous functions, which means it's going to go and look for the thing that you want, and then it's going to, take as much time as it needs, and then it's going to come back to you. So what we're going to do is we're going to write chrome.storage. So Chrome references just the browser itself, and then storage means we want to get the functions for storage. And we can specify what storage we want from here. We can specify either sync storage, which means it's going to be synced across all your devices, or we can specify local. It doesn't really matter for this project, but we're going to make it sync just so that, study mode could apply to lots of different places. We need to specify what we're going to do. We can either set or we can get. Right now, we want to set our study mode to be whatever we just changed it to. So there's two properties that we want in here. The first thing is we need to specify a JavaScript object, which has all the things that we want to set. And then the second thing we can do is we can specify a callback function. So a callback function basically means I already finished this asynchronous operation. Now what do you want me to do? And when we're setting things here, we don't really care. Like, we don't want to do anything. We could log the success to the console if we want to, but that doesn't really help us. So we're going to leave the second parameter out. Again, parameters, if you don't need them, you can leave them out. And instead, we're just going to specify the object of the things that we want to update. So we're going to specify, again, because this is an object, it has to have key value pairs. We're going to set our key to be our mode. And then we're going to give it a value. We're going to give it whatever study mode currently is. So you'll notice that in the manifest, we specified everything as a string here. We don't have to do that if we're writing an object just in line like this. So if this is a variable, that might get a little trickier, but because this isn't a variable, we can just write out mode and it assumes that it's going to be a string and it's going to name the property mode. This here, because it's already a variable, it's not going to like put a string that says study mode in there. It's instead going to get the value of the variable and put it in that object. So we went ahead and did that. And what we need to do is we need to update the label in the pop-up that tells us study mode is now currently on or off. So we're going to write another function in just a second called update label. And we haven't done that yet. So we wrote our click handler here. We can call our click handler by putting it in here. And I don't think that I have to put parentheses here. Rob, can you confirm or deny? Okay, that's what I thought.
It won't work.
Yes. Okay. So we're not going to put parentheses here. It's basically just saying, what function do you want me to execute? If I put parentheses, it's going to literally try and execute the function right there, which is not what we want. So our function is over here. The other thing we can do is we can literally just write the function in place of this call over here. We're only going to use it once. We're never going to use it again. So it doesn't really make sense to like define it somewhere else. So for readability, I'm just going to put it directly in here. We're going to specify that the function we want to execute is our click handler. And we don't actually have to name it anymore because it's only being used once. And we can take this out. Okay, sweet deal. So we have our function in here. If you want to leave it out, that's totally fine. If it makes more sense to you, that's, whatever you want to do is totally fine. And then the other thing we need to do is we need to specify another function called update label. And our update label is going to try and change the text in our pop-up. So we don't need a parameter in here. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to get mode label, the element that we referenced earlier, and we're going to set the value to be something else. Or sorry, not the value, the text content. So text content means we're just changing the value or the text that's inside. We need to specify what we need to change it to. So we'll change it to the same prefix that we had previously, study mode. And then we're going to concatenate some things in here using a ternary operator. So if study mode is on, so if it's true, then we're going to put on. If it's false, that means study mode is off, and we're going to put it as off. You could literally just put study mode right there and it would, display true or false, but study mode true doesn't like really make any sense. So we'll just go with on and off. And then just for flavor, we'll put an exclamation point because studying is exciting. Okay, so we got our update label here. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to call update label once at the very bottom, which means when our page is being brought up for the first time, when it's being opened, we want to, it basically just executes the code from top to bottom. So it's going to, get the things, it's going to set these listeners, and then we want to execute the label once, which means we want to actually change it. Because if you look back in our popup.html, we put it as temp, which means we didn't have a value yet. We don't know if it's on or off. But when the script is loaded for the first time, when the page is loaded, we want to update it. So now we can. All right, so we got that. Let's go ahead and test it and see if it works. So go back into Chrome. Your extension should already be loaded. If it weren't loaded or if there was something wrong and you need to reset it, you can always remove it. And then you can load unpacked again from the same location. But if it's not, then you can just click the refresh button and it'll update any changes. And we are going to have to repin it because we just deleted it. And so let's see if that worked. So if we open it, our study mode is off by default. So that the update label worked. And then if we click toggle, it changes back and forth, right? That's pretty cool. The other thing is that we also set the value. We didn't get the value, which I think is actually something that we should do right now. So instead of calling update label, I lied to you slightly. What we're going to do instead is we're going to first get whatever value is currently in there for study mode. So if we opened it previously and set it to be true, then we're going to close it and set it to be on. When it opens again, it should be true. So we're going to write chrome.storage.get. And we have the same two parameters here. We have our object that says, what do we want to get? And then also our function callback, which means once we've gotten it, what do we want to do with it? So in this object, we need to specify what key do we want to grab. So we want to grab the mode key. And it has to have a value. And the value in this case is, what do we want if we don't find it? What's our default value? And our default value is going to be false. And then our function callback, again, I'm putting it in line. You can create your own function and put it somewhere else if you want. Our function here is going to have a parameter that we can call anything. We can call it whatever we want. I'm going to call it result. And this is going to hold the data about what did we get back. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to say study mode. So our variable in the file here is equal to result.mode. So our result holds all of the values we queried for as, properties. And then we get whatever the value of mode is and put it in study mode. And again, now we want to update our label here. Okay, so you might be asking, why do we need to put this in a function? Why can't we just call get and then put this outside at the bottom here? And again, it's because of asynchronicity. I don't know if that's a word. This function will go on its own time, get its things, and your script will not wait for it. So if you put stuff down here, it's going to execute before all that data comes back. So instead, if we have something that relates to the result of that function, then we need to put it in the callback so that our study mode, we have the actual data. So we'll go ahead and save that. And we'll go back in here, we'll refresh. And so, something didn't go right. Let's look at what the error is here. Chrome.storage.get. I didn't put the sync in here. You gotta specify which storage it is. We're gonna get it from synchronous storage because that's where we put it, and we're gonna get it, and we'll resave the file, and we'll try it again. So we'll clear the error here, we'll refresh, and we'll open it again. So study mode is off by default, which is what we expect. If we turn it on, we can toggle it as many times as we want. Let's leave it on and close the pop-up. Now, if we open the pop-up again, it gets it from storage and it knows that it's on. And so we can toggle it again, toggle it off, close it, open it again, and now it's off. So it's persistent, which is super cool. And we could use it from another script. If we call get literally anywhere else in our code, we can get the value, no problem. So there's still a lot of things that I wanted to put in here. We haven't even talked about catching the web request yet. We haven't created our page for where we're going to redirect to. And that's probably, I don't know, it's going to be a while. And it's already 6:55. So I don't want to waste any more of your time. The code for the whole thing is already on the link tree and it'll be up for the rest of the night if you want to take a look at everything else. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and send me a DM. Is anyone interested in staying until 7:30 and trying to work a little bit further on this? Yes, so that's the thing that we just had. So chrome.storage.get doesn't exist, but chrome.storage.sync.get exists.
Do I need to hit the clear all button?
Yes.
Okay.
If you reload the extension, clear the errors just so you see that if it's a new error or an old one. If you made that change, then you shouldn't get it again.
I did not know I had to clear it.
Gotcha. Zip file is on nighthacks.org/linktree under workshop assets. Say it again. So the box is large because we previously specified a certain height and it would always open to that height. But by default, it's only going to make enough space for the content that it needs to. So if you take out the height property, like if we go in here to our HTML page and we originally put a height in the body selector. If you take that out, then it will make it only as big as it needs to be. Any other questions right now before I move on to something else? I can't. The order does not matter. As long as you have all of the properties and you have a comma after every one that is not the last one, that's all that matters. The values inside the property matter, but the order of the properties does not matter. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Stop me if you need me to stop at any point. It is not a problem. So the next thing that we want to handle here is we want to do something in our background. So again, we haven't even touched the catching when people go to certain websites, which is actually part of the main reason why we would make this an extension in the first place is we want to take advantage of functions of the browser that we can't do with just a normal web page. And that's why extensions are cool. You can do a lot of really cool stuff like interacting with other pages' content or interacting with the browser in interesting ways. So we're going to go into background.js, which we created earlier. We're going to put a couple things in here. So I'm going to leave some space at the top because we're going to put something in there shortly. But essentially what we need to do is we need to catch another event. So in this case, instead of clicking, catching when a button is clicked, we need to catch when the user navigates to a specific page. So we need to catch the chrome.web navigation. So again, Chrome, and then we specify what part of Chrome do we want to use. So we want to use the web navigation functions. And the event we want to catch is on before navigate, which means when they're about to go somewhere, like the request to go somewhere has already gone through and they're about to get sent there. Instead, we want to catch it and do something first. And so this is our event, and we add our listener here. When we use the listener for the button, it was add event listener. Chrome for this is just add listener. So there's no add event listener. There's probably a reason for that. I don't know if it was to prevent confusion or what, but just add listener. And then we're going to put, we're going to create another function in here that's our callback function for when this happens. So we're going to create function, and we don't have to name it because it's just declared in here. If we declared it somewhere else, we would have to name it. And we're going to put one parameter in here with the event details. And then we're going to open it. And so this is where we can write all the things that we're going to do in our function. Do something cool. And we'll do something cool very shortly. And the thing that we're going to do that's really cool is basically we're going to take them somewhere else. So what we're going to do is we're going to call chrome.tabs.update, which means the current, change something related to the tabs that are currently open. And the tab that we want to select is the first property. And we can get this tab that they're currently in by doing details.tab ID, which means the current tab, what is the ID? It's a numeric value that Chrome stores behind the scenes. And then we need to specify where do we want to update them to. And there's lots of things that you can specify about the update. So it's the format here is it needs to be an object. And the object can have lots of different updates that you want to make. We want to update the URL property, which is what is the current URL of this tab. And we want to instead send it to something called chrome.runtime.getURL. We're going to specify basically a page that we create that is alternative. You could put an actual URL in here. Like if we want to just send it to Google, you could send it to google.com. That's totally fine. But because we want to send them to one of our web pages, we need to specify that it's to, we have to get the URL dynamically. So we're going to create another folder in here, HTML, and then we're going to create altpage.html. What am I missing here? Oh, this should not be a semicolon. We can just leave a comma off here since it's the last property. So where this page is located is going to be different on everyone's Chrome because numeric values, addresses are going to be different everywhere. So we need to just tell Chrome that as it's running, figure it out for us, and then put it up there. And we haven't created this yet, so let's go ahead and do that. That's the next step. So we're going to go into our HTML folder and we're going to create altpage.html. And this one is a lot longer, and this is not super important. So here, I'm going to do something that's kind of cheating in the interest of being able to finish in half an hour. I'm just going to go to the repository and just copy out what's supposed to be in this page and then paste it in. And so we're just all going to do that. So nighthacks.org/linktree, and then go to where it says full workshop code. And you should be brought to a GitHub repository, which has all of my code that I've written here, and you can, reference at the end if you want. So we're going to go into the HTML page in here, and you'll notice that we already have an alt page defined, and there's a decent amount of stuff in here. And we're going to at least run through everything so that you know what it is. But we're not going to write it by hand just because it would take too much time and we don't have time. So I went ahead and paste this in, do so when you get a chance. What we're gonna run through the elements that are in here first, and then talk a little bit about the CSS changes, The CSS that I put in here literally has no functional change. It just makes things look prettier. And I say prettier because it doesn't make it look pretty. It still looks kind of bad, but it's better than it would be without it. So what we have on this page, which is going to bring up as like the whole web page, we have a header at the top. H1 means like the first level of header. There's 6 different headers, H1 being the largest font and H6 being the smallest. And we're going to use the class attribute to add a class to several different tags and then just style them all at once through that attribute. So we want to create some space between our elements so that they're not all grouped together. So we're going to create a spaced class and we'll put some space in there. And this header just lets them know that they're in study mode currently. And then we have a paragraph with just some description information, nothing super fancy there. And then we have some controls that the person can use. So something that I was thinking about after I created the first draft of this is that maybe you have specified that you don't want to go to YouTube when you're studying, but an assignment requires you to watch a YouTube video, which, we got to have some sort of fail safe for that. So we're going to implement a snooze feature, which basically says snooze this for X minutes, and it won't block you for that many minutes. And then after that, it'll block you again. So these are some controls in here. We created a little container that just has all the snooze stuff inside of it. And then we have a paragraph telling us how long should we snooze it for. And we put an input directly into another element. So our input is where we can put values in, and then we can use whatever value is in there to modify our JavaScript code. So we're going to snooze for however many minutes are put into the input. And then we'll open the button here. There's a button that will actually commit the snooze and then commit, like it's committing a murder or something, commit the snooze. And then we'll have an image down here. GIFs are cool. If you've seen any of my announcements recently, you'll know that I'm in a GIF phase. So we'll put a GIF in here. And again, we got to have a script to make all of this interactive. So we're going to put our script at the bottom, altpage.js. And we haven't created that yet, so we might as well now. So in your source folder, we're going to create altpage.js. And that's pretty much the last thing we're going to do today. We're just going to put a bunch of stuff in here, and then we're going to change a little bit more in the background.js. Okay. So let's actually go back to background.js first. I lied to you slightly. So we're going to put one more thing in here. So right now, our event catches every single navigation, doesn't care about the URL. We want to specify which URL should it catch. So we're going to do that by creating an array here. And our array is going to have all the things we want to catch. Make this look pretty. And we don't want to just specify a bunch of strings in here. Chrome has their own way of, matching things that's different from a lot of different things. So instead, what we're doing is we're going to specify an array of objects, and each object is going to be what URL do we want to match and how do we want to match it. There's lots of ways you can do it. You can match it against the host, which means the domain. You can match it against the the route, which is the information afterwards. We only really care about the domain right now, so we're going to match it as host contains. Which means if whatever we specify is anywhere in the domain, we want to catch it. And we're going to put a couple things in here. We'll put YouTube as one, since that's my worst. That's my worst. That's the thing I go to most often. And then we're going to put Instagram in here. We'll put Twitter in here, and then we'll put Reddit as the last one. You can make these whatever you want. It really, it's whatever makes the most sense for you. Okay, so we put all those in, and copy and paste them. It's the same format every time, and make sure it's in an array. And we're going to add it to the end of the on before navigate listener. So the listener has another optional parameter over here. And this parameter is going to be a URL filter, which means we only want to, do this event and add this listener for certain URLs. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to create an object. We're going to say, which URLs do you want us to filter? And then we're going to, sorry, this should not be URL up here. So we're going to rename this filter since that's what it is. So we're going to create an object as a second parameter. The object is saying, what do we want to filter? We want to filter the URL. And what do we want to filter it with? Well, we just defined all the things that we want to use. And again, you could define this all in line right here, but that actually, I've tried it and it just looks disgusting. So I'm going to put it somewhere else. Just make it a little more readable. So we got this in here. We can actually test this right now. So this should, in theory, if we try and go to any of these sites, it will block us every single time. So let's go in here. We'll go into our extensions and we'll reload. No errors, which is awesome. If you have any errors, of course, just raise your hand. And let's try and go to one of the sites that we just outlawed, youtube.com. Sweet deal. So it took us somewhere else. It's found the right site and it took us to our page that we defined. So you're in study mode. You've marked this site as blockable, snooze for however many minutes, snooze button. Those don't do anything yet. And then we have our GIF at the bottom of motivational encouragement, which is super cool. And if we try and go to any other website, so I have Wordle up here, we didn't outlaw Wordle, so we could still do Wordles if we want to, which is also a distraction, so maybe we should outlaw that, but that's for another time. Oh, there was an error. What did we do? No tab with ID 1963. Okay, I came across this a couple times. I don't actually know what's going on with this. This just kind of like pops up every once in a while. I think it's probably something is resolving after we've already like closed a tab or the tab has been updated. But it doesn't actually have any effect on our extension. So we're just going to ignore it and pretend that it didn't happen, which is not good life advice, but it's good advice for this workshop. And that's all that matters. Okay, so we did that. What's the next thing we're going to do? We already defined our alt page, so we can skip through all that. And we're going to go back to our alt page.js down here. We want to implement a couple things. First of all, we want to handle when they click the snooze button. We want to actually commit the snooze. Again, commit the snooze sounds so weird, but we're going to say it anyway. And the way we're going to do that is we need to get a couple things. First of all, we need to get a reference to the input so we can get the value from it. And we also need to get a reference to the button so we can add a listener to it. So we're going to put that up at the top. We're going to put minutes input is equal to document.get element by ID. And it's the exact same thing here. It's usually a good idea to name the variable and the ID the same thing so you know exactly what you're talking about, but you can name the variable whatever you want. We're also going to do the same thing for the snooze button here, which again, I've matched the ID and the variable name. So I'm just going to copy this over. So these are defined in the page. Again, we didn't write the page, so these are the two elements, the snooze button and then the input. And the main thing we want to do is really just listen for the button and then do a bunch of things from there. So let's go ahead and start with snooze button.add event listener. And again, we want to listen for a click. And then we want to specify what function do we want to run once the click happens. And we don't need a parameter because we don't care about any of the event details in this case. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to get first the number of minutes that we want to snooze for, which is in our input. So the way we do that is we're going to create a constant variable here for our minutes. We're going to do minutes input dot value. So if you have an input and you call dot value, it'll get whatever's in input. But this is going to return a string, which is not what we want. We want a number, right? So we're going to simply convert it to a number by creating a number object. And we're just going to put minutes dot value as the argument. So this will convert whatever the value is to a number. If it is not a number, it will convert it to NaN, which stands for not a number, and you can't really do any arithmetic with it, but it is still technically a number. If there's nothing in the input, it will turn it into a 0. I know just because I tested it, but that would obviously be something you would need to think about as you were creating an extension. And the other thing that I did in this altpage.html is I specified a type for this input. We specified a type of number, which means they physically cannot type anything into this that is not a number, which means we don't have to really worry about it like being a string and then converting to not a number. So we're not going to put in a catch for that. We are going to put in a catch for if minutes is less than 0, because it could be negative and that doesn't make any sense. And instead, we're just going to set minutes equal to 0 because we don't want to deal with that. Okay. So next thing we need to do is we need to convert this into a date. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make it a date, and then we're going to store the date. And then in our background script, we're basically going to check, are we past the end of the snooze date? And if we are, we're going to, block them. But if If the snooze has not finished yet, then we're gonna just let them go through. So we need to create a now date. We're gonna create a date object, which has literally all of the date information you could ever need. And if we create a new date object, it defaults, if you don't put anything in the parameters, to the current moment, which is what we want. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create another date. And we're going to specify what do we want this date to be. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to do now.getTime. Usually when you're doing arithmetic with dates, it's a good idea to put it in milliseconds. If you've ever used Java before, system to current time millis, we're basically doing the same thing here. If we do a date object.getTime, it gets the current date in milliseconds, which is what we want. And then essentially we're going to add 60,000 times the number of minutes that we want to snooze for. Again, 60 seconds in a minute, 1,000 milliseconds in a second. So that's how we get the 60,000. So we're adding a number of milliseconds, which puts it to a later date. And then if you put a long value, or milliseconds, back into the date object, it knows that it's milliseconds and it'll convert it into the date for you. So you don't have to do any like crazy operations, which is very, very nice. And what we want to do is we want to put this in storage. So we're going to do chrome.storage.sync. Remember the sync, I forgot it last time. And we're going to set a value. And again, we need to specify an object first, which is what do we want to set? And then we have to specify our callback function, which means after we do that, what happens? And actually, we're not even going to specify the callback because the only thing I put in here is just a logging function to say we did this thing, which you could do if you want. It's probably a good idea, but we're not going to do that just to save some time. So again, specify what do we want to put in by the key that we want to store it in, and then the value. So we're going to call this end snooze because it's the date that the snooze ends, the exact moment in time. And then we're going to put in our new date. So again, end snooze is not a variable, which means it just assumes that it's a string, the name of the key. And then our new date here is a variable, so it's going to put in the date value. If we do this, you would think that it would work, but Stack Overflow tells me that it does not work. So we're going to listen to Stack Overflow. Chrome has some sort of issue with storing like date objects, and it kind of gets a little bit messy. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to convert this to JSON. Like I was saying earlier, JSON is basically the accepted standard when you're working on the web for exchanging data. So if we have this really complicated data that's not just like a number or a string, then we want to convert it into like a format that is easily readable and easily transmittable. So instead of just using new date, we're going to call the toJSON function. And this just turns it into a JSON object, which is much easier for Chrome to handle. We don't have to deal with it directly, but it makes everything nice and pretty. And that's all we're going to do. So we just set it in storage. Now, whatever value is in end storage at any moment in time is the current longest snooze. So if we snooze for 10 minutes and then a minute later we snooze for 20 minutes, it'll override the previous snooze value and it'll put the date of the longer snooze. So whatever our most recent snooze is a value in there. If there's nothing in there, we haven't snoozed before, and so we don't care. So great. So now what do we need to do? We need to put this in our background and basically modify our web navigation event and only block it if they are not currently snoozing it. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to put a couple of extra criteria and conditions in this top level of the listener. So this chrome.tabs.update is eventually going to go in the middle, but we're going to stack a couple of things. So I'm just going to push it off to the side for now. So first thing we need to do is we need to check if we're even in study mode at all. Right now, regardless of whether we're not in study mode, it's still going to catch the event and it's still going to redirect us. We only want to do it if they are in study. So we're going to do a chrome.storage.sync.get. And what are we going to get? We're going to get the mode, which is where we put our current value of study mode. And the default we're going to say is false, which means we're not in study mode. If it hasn't been stored yet, we're going to put it as false. And we need to specify our callback function because, again, this is asynchronous, so we can't just put it in order. We have to say, after you get this, now we want to do some stuff with it. And what we're going to do, again, we have to have our details parameter in here because that's where the data comes back through. So our function details. And we're going to get if details.mode. So mode is a Boolean, which means it's either true or false. And if study mode is on, then we want to block them. If study mode is off, we don't care. And so it just goes through the if statement and nothing happens. So everything that we want to do regarding the blocking is going to happen inside this if statement. And we're going to check a couple of other things first. So the other thing we need to do is we need to get our snooze date. So when is the snooze going to end? And that's another chrome.storage.sync.get. What are we getting this time? We are getting our end snooze, which is what we called it. And we specify a default value for this. We could do a couple of different things. We could like make it new date to specify that the default is now, which means the snooze should not happen. But just to make things simple, we're going to specify it as null, which means we didn't have anything in there. And we're going to specify our function here. And we need to call this something else. So actually, I'm going to go back up and I'm going to, actually, we won't change anything. Actually, we absolutely will. So if we put details in here, we'll have 3 different variables in the same scope with the name details, which is bad. So we're going to keep details for our navigate listener. And this we're going to call mode details because that's what we care about. And we'll change this value over here to mode details.mode. And then over here, we'll spend this as snooze details. And so function snooze details, and then open the function and execute a bunch of stuff. This looks ugly, but I don't think I can fix it because that's just how my the formatter is working. So we have our function in here. What do we want to do with this? We want to check if the snooze has not expired yet, or if there even was a value for the snooze date at all. So the first thing we need to check is in our condition is if snooze details is equal to null, which means you're not snoozing. We haven't ever snoozed before. There's nothing in there, in which case we want to block them. Or the other condition that we want to use is if this is going to be a little more involved, we're going to do snooze details dot end snooze is less than the current date. So I'm going to put this on its own line just so that we can see this a little more clearly. Am I missing a parenthesis or do I have too many? I have too many. This should be back. So the condition here first checks, do we even have a snooze date at all? We don't, in which case we want to block them. Or if there is a snooze date, and again, because we queried for the end snooze key, we have to actually get the value from it. And that gets converted back into a date. So if it's, you'll remember that we put it into JSON format. Date actually can just handle that. You don't have to convert it out of a JSON first. This is one way of doing that, converting it back into a date. And then we want to say if the snooze date has already passed, which means we still want to block them. If the snooze date has not passed and our current date is actually greater than that, then we want to block them. If it's less, the snooze hasn't passed and we don't want to block them, they can just go and do whatever they want. So now that we have all those conditions, we can go back down here to our chrome.tabs.update, which actually does the blocking. Oh no. And we can throw it right in the middle here after this very long chain. So again, this all has to be chained together because it's all asynchronous calls every time you get from the storage, which means you can't put things in order. You have to wait for it to finish before you can use the data, which is what we want. So that's why we're putting in function callbacks. Okay, that was a lot, but that
URL or URL filter still goes at the bottom.
Yes, the URL filter is still at the bottom on the on before navigate add listener as the second parameter. So we have the function to execute as the first parameter and then this at the bottom. Okay, that's all the code I was going to write. So we're just going to go ahead and test this. Does anyone need me to leave this up for a little bit longer? All good? Okay, let's see if this worked. So we'll reload our extension here. So let's start with study mode is off, which we put in our parameter that says if we don't have study mode on, we should just not even catch anything. So let's try and go to YouTube. Sweet deal. We can do that. And let's try again with study mode on, if we can go to YouTube. We can't. So we haven't snoozed yet, which means that condition that said if snooze details is equal to null, that catches this case. So let's try and snooze it here for 1 minute. And we'll click the snooze button and that'll commit it to storage. And so let's try and go back to YouTube. Again, study mode is still on. It's persistent up here. We'll go to youtube.com. Oh no. What horrible fate has befallen us now? Let's check and see if there's any errors maybe. Type error, cannot read properties of null, add event listener, all page 14. Okay, so this is not liking the add event listener for the button, the snooze button. Let me see if I maybe type something incorrectly. Oh, I don't think I called it snooze button. Let's go back into alt page here. Yeah, so I just called this button snooze, which I don't actually like that. I'm going to keep the naming the same. So we're going to update the button's ID in alt page to snooze button. And in our alt page.js, we still want to get the snooze button ID. So that's going to remain the same. So let's go back in and try it again. We'll reload our extension. Anytime that you reload an extension, it's going to close out of anything that you had open, which just resets everything. So study mode is currently on. If we try and go to YouTube, it'll block it. We snooze for 1 minute and click the button. Let's check the console to see if there were any errors this time. So we can go to inspect and then go up to console. No errors. So let's try it now. So let's try going back to YouTube. And it's going to let us through now. So that date is saved in storage. Every time you make a request and it catches one of the URLs, it's going to check to see whatever is currently in storage. So we'll wait about a minute and then try it again, see if it blocks us this time. And then we'll see if hopefully it works. I think it'll work. Does anyone having any errors popping up or any issues?
Mine is not working.
Define not working.
It is, the snooze isn't working specifically.
Okay, so right click on the page and go to inspect and then console and see if there's any errors in there. And if not, check that extensions page and see if there's any errors in there. Because if it's not working, it's probably going to give you an error. You also raised your hand. What's up?
Yeah, I end up loading the unpacked package onto the extension.
Loading the unpacked?
Like loading the extension onto it.
Yeah, so if you have everything saved and it's all in the right file structure. So again, we have a big folder called study helper, and then we have all of our folders and then the manifest at the same level inside. If you go into settings, and then actually you can go to more tools and extensions down here, but you just want to get to this extensions page, and then you can click load unpacked and pop through here, find where your folder is, click the folder, and then unpack it like that. So now if we go back in here and we try and go to YouTube again, oh, actually I just repacked it. So probably this isn't a valid thing. So we'll do 1 more minute on the snooze since I just repacked it. And just to verify that it in fact does not work, we can also go to like Twitter, which is another thing we put in. We can go to Reddit, all of those. And if we wait a minute, it'll block us when we try and go back. All right, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. Pretty simple extension, nothing super crazy going on here. It's a great way to get involved with web development. Writing a Chrome extension was the very first time that I ever wrote JavaScript. And since then, I've done a lot of other JavaScript related things for various reasons. I ended up getting a front end internship, which was, I wouldn't have even considered it, except that I wanted, had an extension idea and wanted to try it out. There's a lot of stuff you can do with web development. And this is all the same that you would do with a normal website. So if you learn the skills here, you can apply them elsewhere. Lots of really cool things you can do. Let's try and go back to YouTube really quick just to make sure it blocks. And it blocks. So our snooze expired, which means we're good. All right, that's pretty much everything. Thank you guys so much for being here. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'll come over to you in a second. Any other questions while I'm here? All right.
Actually, so I was wondering, if you want to like scrape information off the page, can you do that with your extension?
You absolutely can. So we took advantage of a couple of APIs related to the browser itself. There's a lot of ways that you can interact with the actual content on the page currently. I didn't want to tackle any of that just because there's too much to cover and it was unrelated to the project, but you absolutely can do that. You can interact with the page. You can change things on the page. If you've ever used an ad blocker before, an ad blocker literally scans through the page and looks for anything that would be an ad and takes the element out. It's not like literally modifying the site like at the source, it's just modifying it on your computer. And that's an extension, you can do the exact same thing if you want to. Lots of cool things you can do that you can only do with an extension because of the control it has. All right. Thank you everyone for being here. It was so great to see all of you. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions, I'm always on Discord. I'm literally always on Discord. Send me anything, send me a DM. Have a good night, everyone.